Hi, I'm Edwin Samuelson, and this is the CineFiles. Today I'm joined with my co-host. To my left, Eric Cohen. To his left, Jeff Galashaw. And to his left, Michael Fultz. And there,
Still me.
There he is. Okay.
The robot camera, man. Got to fire it.
Fire that robot camera. All right, well today we're going to be talking about a subject that we've been planning for quite a while, and we're going to try to be constructive about it, because one of the films that we're going to talk about, we already know it's going to be a lot of controversy here in this group. But the subject today...
Well, what's the topic?
Well, I'm getting into it. The topic today is 3 adaptations of one of my favorite books of all time. In fact, I think it's one of the most influential horror science fiction books ever written.
The novella.
Yeah, and it was written by Richard Mathesons, and the book is I Am Legend, which was published in the 1950s, which has influenced many writers from Harlan Ellison to Stephen King, Clive Barker, the list goes on. The film was adapted 3 times to the screen with various success. We'll be starting off with the first one, which is probably the most faithful to the book, but still not as faithful as it could be. And the film is The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price. The original screenplay was written by Richard Matheson to be filmed by Hammer Films.
Which would have been awesome.
It would have been great if it was done by Hammer. Unfortunately, the censors said, nope, you can't do this. So the film was then sold to an Italian production company, and the script was rewritten, and it was made in Rome with, of course, Vincent Price. And Richard Matheson wasn't too happy with it, so he had his name taken off of the screenplay, even though he co-wrote it. And this film actually influenced George Romero. In fact, George Romero has gone on to say this for Night of the Living Dead, and if you see the film, you can easily see why. It's the lowest budget of the 3. It suffers from it has some problems, but it is a very atmospheric film, and the story still works. It could have been better if they had more money and been a little bit more faithful to the book, but I think it's a great little story. Well, Eric, why don't you, or Mike, I should ask you, tell us a little bit about the story again, because I mean...
Okay, well, let's start. You shut up.
Because I know my
your coffee. It basically falls around each story revolves around Robert. Each adaptation falls around the main character, Robert Neville, who is immune to a disease that has infected the planet Earth, essentially, and he becomes the last man on Earth. Thus the title of the film, and Vincent Price plays this character. And during the day, he has to hunt and look for the disease carriers, vampires of legend in the first film. They're affected by crucifixes, they're affected by holy water, by garlic. And then when he goes home at night, he has to shutter himself in. And one of the frightening things from the book that is carried over in the first film that I really like, because I think the first film is most true to the book.
It is.
And this is something you brought up when we discussed this amongst ourselves, is you have his neighbor, who is a very essential character in the book, who is in the film, but I believe it's not his neighbor, it's his co-worker.
It's his co-worker in the
film. It's his co-worker.
And you sit there, and as he's kind of trying to get through the night, because night after night he's going crazy, and his neighbor, along with the others, are urging him to come out so they can, quote-unquote, end his misery. And it's always like, Neville, get out here. Neville, come on.
Yeah,
Neville, you know, you're gonna die someday, you know, and so not only do you have vampires scraping at your house, but you also have to deal with them talking at you and destroying down your psychological walls, along with the walls that you've put up around this house. And yeah, the film suffers a lot from a very, very small budget, and it seems really kind of strange that Hammer backed down from the censors, but Hammer also had to deal a lot with the Catholic League of Decency, which is strange, until after a while they're like, fuck it, and we're just going to put in a lot of nudity and gore. But
well, I have a feeling. You said I have a feeling that what reason why that broke down wasn't so much a censorship but budget issues, because Hammer at that time, like around the mid to late '60s, was having a lot of budget issues.
No, it was the censors.
Yeah, it was the censors.
Really, because I know that they had a lot of projects they had planned to greenlight. One of the most famous, legendary ones was this one called Zeppelins versus Pterodactyls. It was supposed to be their big budget special effects piece.
And Vampirella.
And none of that shit. I mean, it had it casted everything, and it wasn't actually censors. It was just they couldn't.
And yeah, they were announced. These were announced. They had posters and everything.
That's why I find it hard to believe, because I Am Legend really shouldn't have a censorship issue. I mean, it's no worse than say what they were already doing.
Well, we don't know
what
the original script looked like.
Yeah,
either, but
man, could you imagine production of that starring Peter Cushing as Neville?
Well, I think Vincent Price was a wonderful Neville.
Vincent Price was
showed
excellent.
the anguish. He showed the heartbreak of dealing with this. He showed his nerves frayed by this. Yeah, you had to deal with these horrible zombies that were just that you could like run circles around. They were just so slow moving.
What do you think? I mean, because that was one of the biggest things in the movie for me was the isolation. I mean, that was what I think made the movie.
Well, I enjoyed it. I didn't read the book, keep in mind, but I enjoyed the film. But it's what you guys mentioned before. I think the thing that took me out of the movie were like the budget issues, and also since he can, like in one scene, he's running back to his house from, I forget where it was, but he's like practically running through the zombies, just pushing them out of his way. So I didn't really feel like that was much of a major threat if he can just manhandle them and get them out of his way. And I guess the way they showed his house boarded up, it seems so easy to break into.
That I agree with you.
But
yeah, no, it's a very cheap film.
Yeah, that's just nitpicking. But overall, I found the film entertaining. I like the story. I especially, well, something that touched me was like when he finally found the dog and it was finally somebody he could talk to and a companion, but then he finds out that it's infected and then he has to end up killing the dog and burying it, and that leads to the next part of the story. But I found that was the scene that really affected me throughout the whole film.
Now, this is a question I have for you, since you haven't read the book, and this is it's the more accurate adaptation of the book than the other movies.
Okay.
What did you think of the concept that he'd been going around killing all these people, and what he didn't realize, he was probably killing people that were already part of this whole new race of humans?
Well, see,
they looked at him as the monster.
Well, I found that interesting, but I guess the problem I had was towards the end. I really didn't. To me, they didn't explain it efficiently for me to truly understand it.
It is more fleshed out in the book.
Yeah, because
he's like put on an executioner's row and everything.
Yeah, because it just seemed like something that came up with last minute. I thought it was an interesting idea, but since it wasn't really too well explained, I just didn't really get into it.
This is the only film adaptation, by the way, folks, that does that. Which is very important. I don't want to give too much away. Well, we're going to give it away. We have to in order to talk about it.
Yeah, this is pretty much spoiler alley.
But one of the big twists in the story, if you read the story, is that, yeah, when he's been killing what he thought were vampires sleeping in daylight, he's also probably been killing this new generation of human beings that have gone beyond the whole vampiric state.
The half-breeds, I guess.
Right.
Well, but what happened is that he was killing off the next evolutionary.
Right. And now it's the reason why the story is called I Am Legend is because he has become the sort of monster they have to kill.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting. It was like he thinks he's the only normal person left on Earth when he's not. You know, he's the you know what I'm saying, he's not. He's the one who's crazy and insane. They're saying. I like that, the idea of the insanity and stuff. And
well, it originally starts out the way you think it does. There is that twist at the end. I mean, not even he expected.
Yeah,
you know, when he's sitting there doing the research, and not even he expects that there's going to be a new strain of human being that's going to start to emerge. He doesn't even that. I mean, that catches him completely by surprise.
And it's brilliantly done. I mean, just warning: the original version, Last Man on Earth, starring Vincent Price. It's the most faithful adaptation. It is a very cheap film. It was made in Italy. It's badly dubbed. It looks like it was made in Italy.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's supposed to take place in the United States, but you see like Italian villas and stuff like that.
And the cars, which are obviously European.
It's Always Sunny. You know, it's an interesting film. You know, to rent it, check it out. You know, don't have your expectations too high. It's just interesting because it is, of the three versions, the most faithful adaptation.
And if you don't like it, don't think that the story is not good. It's just this is not as accurate as it could be. I mean, still, even though it's the most faithful, it's not completely faithful to the book.
And Vincent Price is great in it.
Yes, he is.
Yeah,
really
one
good.
of his best roles.
And be sure you check out the DVD. There's an interview with Richard Mathesons when he talks about the history of the film, which is just as fascinating. Definitely check that out and get the book too. Well, let's get on to the next remake and of the book, I should say.
The first remake.
Yeah, the first remake, and this one is actually a pretty big budget film compared to the first one. Unfortunately, at the time that it came out, the Manson murders happened, so there was a lot of family stuff added to the film. There's the family, and they make these vampires, even though they're never called vampires in any of the movies, a kind of like a cult.
Well, they're mutants.
They're mutants, and
they're albinos.
They're not vampires.
They're
albino mutants.
They're not even living dead. They're just mutants.
And this one, of course, now stars Charlton Heston as Neville, and actually, I think he's a very good Neville. This is a very entertaining film. I love it. It's one of my favorite, cult movies. But as an adaptation of the original book, it's horrible. but as a movie on its own, it's very entertaining.
It's an action film.
It is an action film, and it's actually pretty ingeniously filmed. They filmed it in L.A. like on Sunday mornings when the city, you know, no one's out there. If you look in the background, you might see a car passing, but the city really does feel isolated. And there's some great scenes in there. In fact, of all the movies we'll be discussing today, I think this is the one that really captures the isolation better than any other ones. With the scenes of him being tormented at night, telling him to come out, you know, I really felt, you know, the insanity of what he must have been feeling. In fact, on the DVD, there's a featurette where Charlton Heston actually meets with an anthropologist to get the idea of what would happen to a man's psyche if he was, you know, alone for so long.
I don't know. I didn't think it was that deep. I think it's a lot of fun.
Oh, it's not deep.
I think he makes a good slack-jaw action hero.
Exactly.
I think it's. I mean, you know.
I would disagree with slack-jaw. Hammy is the more.
He's hammy, but he's very good in the role.
He's very hammy, very good. He's Charlton Heston, you know, from the early 70s.
He gets a sexy black chick in bed with him.
Rosalind Cash.
Well, I'll say this about all three of the films. I think whenever you cast the lead role in any interpretation of I Am Legend, you have, since the story's about isolation, the actor you're going to have to like in the first place, because you're going to feed off of him throughout most of the film. And with the first film, it was Vincent Price. This one was Charlton Heston, and he's not my favorite actors of all, so this is probably why this is, out of the three, my least liked one, because I just don't like Charlton Heston. I just feel he doesn't have any, he has very little. I'm not going to say he doesn't have any, little charisma. So I really didn't want to spend 2 hours.
Wow.
Yes.
I think he has a lot of charisma. He has a lot
wow, that is a bold criticism.
Hey,
unfounded.
I'm for that.
I think he carries the movie. I think he's very, very enjoyable. You know, when he's shooting that gun, you really believe him as this heroic character. And one thing I have to mention too. I love.
Burt Reynolds could have played that part. You know,
I thought
any
Charlton Heston was
70s
awesome.
action stud. Could
and
have
I probably would have enjoyed it more if
Actually,
Burt
Burt Reynolds
had
probably would have been a little too young.
I think it's a very entertaining film. I have fond memories of it as a kid. I used to love Omega Man. You know,
I just wouldn't believe him as a scientist, Burt Reynolds. I can believe Charlton Heston as a scientist. Somewhat.
But
assistant.
Well, you know something? I'll tell you. To me, it's the most fun out of the three.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah,
it's the most fun. Also, you do get the sense that Charlton Heston's character, or Neville, gets thrown off a lot when he figures out that the woman he's been sleeping with and the little colony of people that she has with her are all partially infected with this, and he doesn't know what to do. And of course, he ends up sacrificing himself in a very Christ-like manner at the end, which was just so over the top. You'd figure Bruce Willis was watching this adaptation and drooling. He's like, I can't wait to have that role.
That guy was a pretty good spear thrower, too.
Yeah.
Those mutants, man, they got good
But
aim.
it's, out of all of them, it's the only one where you had a real sense that the home that Robert Neville lived in
it was a fortress.
Was really fortified.
It was a fortress.
That sucker was guarded. I mean, that was really...
That was ingenious, though. I like the way he set up his own little world, and I thought that was great, where he had, you know, like the generator, he had the elevator, he had all the food.
Yeah, no, it was very, very specific. Like, you could see a man who keeps himself sane by truly building his castle and making it all the way. And then he, of course, has the bust of Beethoven that he sits
and he talks to
with.
which I liked quite a bit. I really like I said before, I got to give credit to, I can't believe we haven't mentioned him earlier, is Anthony Zerbe. Anthony Zerbe is
he's always creepy.
Matthias is
he's
terrific.
Always creepy.
He's terrific, and I love the whole thing. You know, with the kind of like they have that little family, you know, with the torches and stuff, and they have the hair that's all white and the big sunglasses, and they put on, they have their skin is peeling off. I think it's great. I love that, even though it's completely not.
And instead of once again making it Neville's neighbor, it was a newscaster.
I thought that was kind of clever, actually, because you know why? Because people knew who he was, and he was like this kind of like, you know, kind of celebrity, and that's why maybe people would follow him.
Right.
They were trying to make him this Manson-like figure who had charisma.
Well, all I know is 70, 71, and 72 were all banner years for Heston, because he had Planet of the Apes, Omega Man, and Soylent Green.
That was when he was in his sci-fi peak.
When did he have Earthquake? Was that around that period?
Yeah, it was 74, I believe. And don't forget,
one of the
Sense
airport
Around.
movies
And all movies.
Yeah, don't forget another heroic.
He was
death
omnipresent.
Scene. Another
You didn't like Soylent Green? There would have been no Blade Runner without Soylent Green.
Soylent Green.
I'm sorry, I didn't like Soylent Green.
Actually, of that
likes
period,
Dream
I gotta
Girls,
say,
doesn't like Soylent Green.
I gotta say that period,
Yes, I
that
like
was
Dream
Heston's
Girls.
best
I will
performance
Soylent
during that
Green.
period was in Soylent Green, and in Soylent Green he delivers a really good performance.
That is a fucking awesome film.
Yeah.
And don't forget Edward G. Robinson, awesome interplay.
Edward G. Robinson is wonderful. It's a good film.
That's a good other, even though it's nothing to do with
Great
this.
vision of future.
You should see it. It's a great.
No Blade Runner without Soylent Green.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and I love a lot of the concepts have been used in a lot of other science fiction films that have come since.
All right, let's move on to our next adaptation.
Well, and by the way, last thing we want to mention too, the I Am Legend, the Omega Man was written by Joyce and William Corrington, who did a lot of Roger Corman films and The Last Planet of the Apes sequel, and it was directed by Boris Siegel, who was Peggy Siegel's father, and he also directed many Elvis films. All right.
We're going to win this race.
The next adaptation was a...
well, we almost saw an adaptation by Ridley Scott,
Ridley
starring Arnold Schwarzenegger.
$100 million movie.
Yeah, which was supposed to take place in San Francisco. But budget went crazy.
Never happened. It was in development for many years, and finally it got approved. And the director, please forgive me, he directed...
Francis Lawrence.
Who directed Constantine. Not the best film, but very well directed. So I had high hopes.
I agree.
And then I heard Will Smith was cast as Neville, and I completely...
And we all were
not
scared,
man, at the thought of that.
And it also,
Not
even
all.
worse, it was written by Akiva Goldsman, who I think is one of the worst
all
writers in
cringing
Hollywood.
at the thought of that.
That one, yeah, that scared me more.
What a nightmare.
I did see the film, and we all saw it. That's why we're talking about it. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but it did have some... It really... It's just a sad because
it's a frustrating film to watch.
It could have been great.
There are things in it that are just so well done.
Especially the isolation.
And there's things there that you thought were going to suck that are actually very well done.
Oh, yeah.
And there are things where it should have been kick-ass where they totally fucking missed the mark.
Oh, I agree. I agree completely. And as I was mentioning to Mike earlier, the one thing that they take out is that the whole thing is that Neville is being, every night when he goes to sleep, the people come out and try to get him to come out of his house.
Right.
This one, they don't even know where he lives.
They don't have personalities. They have
No.
like one creature that's starting to develop his own individual kind of personality.
And it's just, they give no explanation. And we got to mention, too, the worst CGI I have ever seen in a Hollywood movie. I have to say.
I agree with that statement. I agree with that statement 500%.
No, I would say Van Helsing was was that much worse.
Well, the movie
worser.
It just has bad
You could
CGI.
have called this, instead of I Am Legend, you could have said Will Smith versus the cartoons.
I agree, and the problem
Sort of
is
like
that
iRobot.
they were all people.
Yeah.
The film was originally filmed with people in suits. However, after they finished, they just said, "This is not working." So they actually CGI'd over all the actors in the suits, and it looks like they rushed it out to make a release date. And because the CGI is poorly rendered, it's just very generic.
Which is really too bad, because there's the best sequence in the entire film when he goes in after his dog, which is a very well done scene.
Yeah, and that's from the part
It's
of the original book.
scary. It's well done. Will Smith is actually very good. That was one of the surprises. Will Smith is good in this film.
Yes, he is.
Better than I thought he'd be.
He was good in it. He captured fear. He wasn't his usual, I'm going to joke and make crack wise and all that stuff. This is a guy that you could tell was
He only had
to
that
keep
one
himself
scene
sane.
doing I Shot the Sheriff.
Right. That was annoying.
Thankfully,
but that scene when he goes in
small.
to go after his dog and he like stops himself and realizes there's a whole hive of these guys, just kind of whatever the fuck they're doing. They're just keep it at that.
Yeah.
You should have gone with that. Instead, we got cartoons.
Yeah, I never felt he was in danger. I can't lie to you on that.
Well, no, I felt that he was in danger, but I mean, the cartoons are ridiculous.
They're not very threatening.
You could take, whoever these studio people were that says this isn't working, or whoever it was that made that statement and made them revise it with this shitty-ass CGI, you can have guys with red contact lenses, i.e. 28 days later, and make it 20 times scarier than and it's funny, on the ironic thing that Jeff pointed out with the fact that in the first film you could push these zombies away, basically, out of the way, move along, and knock them down. They're super strong and they jump around like monkeys.
Yeah.
And it's...
And they're also, we want to mention too, these creatures are also mute. They don't speak at all like in the other films, and they're just creatures. You know, they're no personality.
I don't mind that conceit. In fact, I told Mike after I saw it that I wouldn't even mind if they ripped off 28 Days Later running zombies. That would still been 1,000 times better than what they came up with.
I agree. I never felt. I never felt they were real. I never, because the thing is,
it was. You're very conscious. You're watching a special effect.
Yeah, give them contact lenses and put some skin lesions on them. That'll be scary.
Which is too bad because it had. I was going to cringe at the thought that he had a dog. You know, because that totally killed the whole idea for me from reading the story and all that stuff. That, you know, he should find a dog and find out the dogs, which I loved in the first film. But that actually worked.
It worked partially.
It actually worked better than I thought it did, and this is where I was frustrated too. I thought that they were going to go there to do a modern twist on the original theme where he was killing what he thought were creatures, and turned out that he was killing the next phase of evolutionary.
Oh, they did. They took that and just threw it on.
Yeah, I thought they were going to make a twist out of that with the way he was doing his own experiments on the vampire creatures. I thought, oh, good, they're finally going back to the original story of this. They don't go there.
And to make it into just a crappy action film.
Yeah, basically, and it's like, and there's things like, you know, I didn't mind, you know, I thought. The inclusion of the girl and the little boy that show up, I thought that was somewhat well done and somewhat well acted, but it was marred by stuff like the "I shot the sheriff" moment. I thought it was.
But didn't you think it was
the Shrek moment?
I was hoping that this is where they show up. Now we're going to get another faithful adaptation of story, and it doesn't become faithful to the story.
But didn't you think it's strange that the woman could basically ward off all those dark seekers and rescue Will Smith on her own, but yet they storm into the house, a really well fortified house that they have no problems getting into?
Well, no, I didn't have a problem with that. I mean, you could explain it by saying she obviously had the equipment to scare them off with the lights and stuff. That's how they showed you that she shut off these lights, and they all. No, what I don't understand.
Well, where'd the lights come from?
What I don't understand is they obviously quarantine Manhattan from everywhere else by destroying all the bridges.
Yep.
How the fuck did she get on that island?
And with a Jeep.
Did she somehow find a pathway through the Holland Tunnel?
That
I don't
is
understand.
very interesting.
And I didn't
know
think
because
about
if
that.
it would have been 3 years, that would have meant every tunnel would have been flooded because the pump systems wouldn't have been working.
And not only
So
that,
they couldn't have
there's
gotten
something
under
else
there.
too I have to mention here too. Okay, number one is Will Smith's supposed to be this Army general, right?
Colonel.
Yeah, and he has probably a $10 million mansion that he didn't just take it over like after
in the
war.
village.
He owns it in the village in Washington Square. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't see a colonel
I was
making that
saying
much money.
that not too many military personnel living in the village, folks.
It's like, yeah, people. I mean, yeah, I would love to be.
But you know, I didn't have a problem. Those things I could accept if it wasn't for the fact that you just explained that you've isolated Manhattan from everywhere else, and yet somehow. He's putting out radio signals hoping someone will meet him at the southern tip of Manhattan when no one can have access to the island. And two, someone actually winds up showing up on this island, forgetting the fact that he's isolated from everybody. I also had a problem with, other things.
What about infected dogs, but the deers and lions were okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another bad CGI is the deers. They're terrible.
All the animals.
The deers are terrible. The dogs are terrible. The lions are terrible. The dark seekers are terrible.
Well, we got to talk about one thing.
CGI is awful.
One thing we got to talk about, Jeff. I'm going to ask you because I want you to get your input.
I had something.
Oh
to
no,
say, but
no, because I want you to ask you this.
No, I didn't. I guess another problem I had with the ending was all of a sudden this religious overtone about God. But then he has no problem committing suicide to save those other two.
Yeah, that was pretty.
Remember, he didn't believe there was a God.
Yeah, but then he did believe there was a God to get her into the escape hatch, and then once he puts her in there, he pulls a grenade and runs at the zombie and thus kills himself. So I'm like, isn't that kind of suicide against God's law?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't think of it that much. I mean, I think he saw himself as sacrificing himself for them and for the greater good because he gave them the cure. What he thought was the cure.
We only have like 3 minutes now, Jeff. I want to ask you.
Okay.
Let's talk about the stuff that did work. Now, here's what I thought worked because we haven't got into that. I'd say the director again. What's his name? Sorry.
Francis Lawrence.
Francis Lawrence actually creates the most isolated version of New York City I've ever seen. He does a wonderful job. That is absolutely phenomenal. That's some of the best I've ever seen in a movie. What else works?
I think Will Smith works.
Will
I was
Smith
surprised.
I would have asked for an actor with a little bit more gravitas, but
Gravitas.
you know, he
he was better than I expected.
He did well for what he was.
Credit.
It was his best acting I've ever seen him do.
The reggae stuff I got on my nerves. You know, how they just obviously he was a Bob Marley fan, so he said, "Let me just have them add this to the script." Then
you didn't need to see the family.
No, and I
they could have cut out all that stuff and added that with more faithful stuff.
Yeah, and also we had that Shrek scene where he knows every single line of Shrek.
Yes, that went on way too long. Also,
oh my God,
and it was joke.
long.
I'm like, are you trying to
the
sell?
scene that was very painful for me to watch, where I thought it should have been trimmed, was a scene where Will Smith goes into a video store and has a conversation with a mannequin. He's trying to do like the whole thing that they did in the other film, and he just can't pull it off. I never felt that he was that.
Yeah, but then again, though, then that would be backed up with something that he pulled off very well, like where he has to kill his dog.
I thought
and it was all done off camera. You just saw his face, and I thought that was very well done.
Yeah.
Yes, that was.
I thought that was very good acting, because that's a tough scene to pull off.
I just couldn't believe the big iron shutters that he had on all of his the place that he was living, and how he had 3 years to fortify that fucking thing, and they got in the first time they realized he was there.
He lived in New York and they don't know where he's lived. You know, it's like saying they think they would find him.
Well, they sort of explained it.
Yeah,
I mean,
where he kept spraying vinegar everywhere he went or whatever.
Right. He kept everyone off. He figured out a way to keep everyone off the scent. That's why at the end. They all converged because they followed them. They didn't follow him.
Yeah, but I don't know.
I mean, that stuff I think there were bigger holes, worse problems with the script to be worried about.
And I also think it's funny that he knew these creatures were pretty much animals, and he's sitting there trying to communicate them with that at the end. I can cure all of you. I can save you. And the thing is just ramming over and over in the glass. And he's like, you'll be safe in the lab. And they bust through the door.
I guarantee that scene would work if they weren't fucking CGI.
Maybe it would.
If they were like human beings playing those parts and stuff like that, it might have been a little more of an element there where it's like, okay, you can believe this guy's finally just lost it. He's just shouting these inane, illogical things.
I always felt I was watching like I said, a special effect. I never felt like I was in the story.
Yeah, but look how much money
That's what I'm saying. If it weren't a special effect,
look how much I Am Legend earned at the box office, and the studio heads can say, well, we didn't do anything wrong. It made a lot of money.
I hate to say that. You're right. You're absolutely right. Well, I'm going to close this because we don't have much time left, but I want to say, too, I really did not like how all of a sudden the the creature, well, it is a vampire, just becomes super smart all of a sudden. You know, like after 3 years, they're able to make traps and all this elaborate stuff when they haven't been able to do anything from before.
Wait, were they able to make traps?
Yeah, they made a trap.
They made a trap
to trap him. That's how they got his dog.
Oh, yeah, that's
It was just totally too fast an evolution, I thought, and I really didn't believe that. And I really thought that lead vampire was pathetic. The whole idea of how come he wants revenge, they didn't really.
Well, you know,
pull that
it's
off.
like it was interesting in concept. It was just execution. It was kind of half-assed. They didn't really think it through. You know?
Well, we're done.
I guess we got to wait another 20 years and we'll see another adaptation.
Last quick question. What's your favorite of all three adaptations?
Oh, Omega Man. It's the most fun.
Last Man on Earth.
God, I would say the fun one is Omega Man. That's one I could sit through and watch again and again.
Ditto. I will agree with you. Omega Man is my favorite, and Last Man on Earth is the most faithful. It's very good. Anyway, that's this show. Thank you very much. Yeah, I like Omega Man quite a bit. I still never get tired. In fact, I think it's one of the most influential horror science fiction books ever written.
The novella.
Yeah, and it was written by Richard Mathesons, and the book is I Am Legend, which was published in the 1950s, which has influenced many writers from Harlan Ellison to Stephen King, Clive Barker, the list goes on. The film was adapted 3 times to the screen with various success. We'll be starting off with the first one, which is probably the most faithful to the book, but still not as faithful as it could be. And the film is The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price. The original screenplay was written by Richard Matheson to be filmed by Hammer Films.
Which would have been awesome.
It would have been great if it was done by Hammer. Unfortunately, the censors... Hi, I'm Edwin Samuelson, and this is the CineFiles. Today I'm joined with my co-host. To my left, Eric Cohen. To his left, Jeff Galashaw. And to his left, Michael Fultz. And there,
Still me.
There he is.
Okay. The robot camera, man. Got to fire it.
Fire that robot camera. All right, well today we're going to be talking about a subject that we've been planning for quite a while, and we're going to try to be constructive about it, because one of the films that we're going to be talking about, we already know it's going to be a lot of controversy here in this group. But the subject today...
Well, what's the topic?
Well, I'm getting into it. The topic today is 3 adaptations of one of my favorite books of all time. Said, nope, you can't do this. So the film was then sold to an Italian production company, and the script was rewritten, and it was made in Rome with, of course, Vincent Price, and Richard Mathesons wasn't too happy with it, so he had his name taken off of the screenplay, even though he co-wrote it. And this film actually influenced George Romero. In fact, George Romero has gone on to say this for Night of the Living Dead, and if you see the film, you can easily see why. It's the lowest budget of the 3. It suffers from it has some problems, but it is a very atmospheric film, and the story still works. It could have been better if they had more money and been a little bit more faithful to the book, but I think it's a great little story. Well, Eric, why don't you, or Mike, I should ask you, tell us a little bit about the story again, because I mean...
Okay, well, let's start. You shut up.
Because I know my
your coffee. It basically falls around each story revolves around each adaptation falls around the main character, Robert Neville, who is immune to a disease that has infected the planet Earth, essentially. And he becomes the last man on Earth. Thus the title of the film, and Vincent Price plays this character. And during the day, he has to hunt and look for the